Let's talk about the moment that stops so many practitioners in their tracks, shall we? All right, so you finally decide you're going to start your email newsletter. Maybe you choose a platform, you connect the form, you might even get your first few subscribers. And then you open up a blank screen and think, oh, what am I supposed to write about? What am I supposed to say every week? If that question has ever made you kind of freeze or procrastinate, or maybe quietly abandon your newsletter plans, you are definitely not alone. And here's really something important that I want you to hear, and that is that most practitioners do not struggle with email because they lack expertise. They struggle because they think a newsletter has to be just something that it just doesn't have to be. Sometimes they think it has to be like perfectly written, deeply educational, highly researched, packed with value in every single paragraph. And that belief tends to create a lot of pressure really fast. So today, I want to take that pressure off. I want to show you what to send in your first email newsletter, how to think about your content in a way that feels strategic but not rigid, and how to create a rhythm that feels supportive versus stressful. So email becomes something that you can actually sustain over time. Hey there and welcome. I'm Leslie Vitel, and I am a business strategist and mentor for integrative and functional medicine and nutrition practitioners, as well as for coaches. And in my work, I help practitioners build sustainable businesses through clear messaging, ethical marketing, and simple systems that support both impact as well as your income. Also, if you enjoy these strategic practice building videos, I invite you to support the channel by clicking the hype, like, and subscribe buttons. All right, so email marketing really is one of the most powerful relationship building tools that you have, regardless of whether you're relatively new in your practice or seasoned, but only when you approach it with clarity instead of the feeling of pressure. So, before we talk about what to send, I want to start by reframing what a newsletter actually is. Because once this clicks, I think everything becomes easier. So, your email newsletter is not a lecture, right? It's not a class or a course. It's certainly not a research paper. And it's not meant to feel like another thing your audience has to get through. Instead, think of your newsletter as a conversation. It's a consistent touch point that reminds people you're here and that you understand their challenges and that you have something thoughtful to offer. So remember, your goal is not to impress. Your goal really is to build that sense of trust. So when someone opens your email, they should feel grounded, supported, and maybe a little clearer than they did before. They should not feel overwhelmed or behind. And you don't want them to feel like they have to do more. That shift alone really can help change how you approach everything that you write in your marketing. And it also explains why simple emails really work so well. Your audience is busy. They already are consuming content probably all day long, right? They're scrolling, they're listening to podcasts, they're probably watching videos already. They're reading posts and articles, all the things, right? So a simple, thoughtful email often lands better than a super long, dense one. Simple emails, they just tend to feel more human. They sound like a real person and they invite reflection instead of consumption. And just as importantly, they are sustainable for you. Consistency beats intensity every single time. I would much rather see you send a clear, thoughtful email once a week than burn out trying to send something super brilliant and then end up disappearing for a month. Now, let's talk about your very first newsletter, because this is where most people really tend to overthink things. And I know I really struggled with this myself back in the day. So please remember your first email does not need to be perfect or even profound. Instead, it just needs to be clear. A strong first newsletter really does three simple things: it welcomes people, it sets expectations, and it establishes your voice. And that's pretty much it, those three things. You might include a short introduction, maybe why you decided to start the newsletter in the first place, what kinds of things you'll be sharing, and how often people can expect to hear from you. This is not a salesy kind of an email. Instead, think of it kind of like an orientation because you're letting people know what kind of space they've just entered and what it will feel like to be here with you. And that alone tends to build trust. Now, one of the biggest reasons people stop sending newsletters is because they feel like they just run out of things to say. So let's solve that right now, shall we? All right. So one of the easiest way to stay consistent with email is to rotate between a few simple, what we call content buckets. Now, you do not need endless unrelated ideas. Instead, you need a few reliable categories you can come back to over and over again over time. So here are 5 that work beautifully for practitioners. Number 1 is addressing a common misconception. So this could be a belief your audience has that maybe keeps them stuck, something they hear all the time that maybe isn't quite accurate, or a myth that creates unnecessary pressure. When you gently reframe a misconception, you end up positioning yourself as a guide, not a lecturer. You're not correcting, you're clarifying. All right, the second bucket is sharing a client or patient pattern that you notice. You don't need all the details, you don't need stories, you don't really need outcomes. You can simply say, here's a pattern that I see come up very often or quite often. And this helps your readers feel seen as well as understood. And that is so important. When people feel understood, trust tends to deepen. Now, the third bucket is offering a shift in perspective. So, this might be a new way of thinking about a familiar problem, maybe a reframe that changes how someone approaches their health, habits, or even their own decisions. Perspective shifts build trust really fast because they change how people feel, not just what they know in their heads. The fourth bucket is a simple teaching moment. So this could be a single concept, an insight, a takeaway. So not everything you write needs to be super comprehensive. Because remember, you are not trying to teach everything you know in an email. That is so critical. Instead, you are simply trying to be helpful and clear. And now the fifth bucket is reflection or questions. And these emails invite people to maybe hit the pause button to think and to notice. And interestingly, these are often the emails that get the most replies, which is so interesting because people don't feel talked at. They feel invited into an actual conversation. Now, let's talk about structure because structure creates that sense of ease for you. So, here's a simple newsletter structure that you can integrate almost every time. So, for example, you can open with a relatable moment or a question. Maybe you name the challenge or theme, you share one clear insight, and then you close with a gentle reflection or an invitation. And that's pretty much it. Pretty simple, right? So you do not need fancy formatting. You do not need perfect grammar. And you certainly do not need super long emails. You need clarity and care. Now, let's talk about frequency, shall we? So I would say once a week is ideal. Once every 2 weeks is actually completely fine as well. What really matters most is choosing a frequency that you can maintain even during busy seasons. Because again, trust is built through consistency. And your audience would much rather hear from you regularly than sporadically. And finally, let's talk about inviting people to work with you, okay? This is really important. So, you do not need to sell in every email, but you do want to make that door visible. So, a simple line at the end is enough. Maybe something like, hey, if you'd like support with this, here's how we can work together. And again, this is not pushy, it's clear. And clarity really tends to build that sense of confidence. Remember, you're not forcing anyone to take action. You're just letting them know what's available when they're ready. So let's take a moment and pull this all together. Your email newsletter, it does not need to be complicated. It does not need to be perfect. And it definitely does not need to sound like someone else, someone that you're not. But it does need to be consistent. Ideally, it sounds like you. And it needs to offer clarity, not contribute to that sense of overwhelm. And when you keep it simple, email becomes really one of the most supportive tools in your business. If this video helped you to feel more confident about starting or continuing your newsletter, please be sure to like and subscribe so that you do not miss future episodes in this marketing and visibility series. And if you are looking for support building simple, sustainable marketing systems that grow with you, you can explore working together over on my website at lesliebytel.com. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.